The year is 1969. The setting is late night with Johnny Carson. Now, this is 4 years before I was born, by the way. I saw this on YouTube. On the Johnny Carson show was a spry Bob Hope, a mega superstar of 20th century entertainment, in radio, in the movies, and on television. Bob Hope was established royalty of all things showbiz, and you know he was royalty because he carried in his right hand the scepter, his signature golf club. He and Johnny were yakking about this or that performance coming up, a kind of ordinary appearance for the sake of getting people to buy tickets to the shows and talk about whatever pet projects might be on Bob Hope's mind. All of a sudden, the crowd roars and breaks into applause, and both men jerk their heads to the right, and their faces yield to delighted smiles. Lo and behold, it is super megastar Dean Martin, also established over time as one of the greats of showbiz in radio, in the movies, and on television. He moseyed on over to the couch, carefully balancing his plastic cup full of, you know, iced tea, wink wink, whereupon Prince Bob Hope scoots down to make room for Prince Dean Martin. What a marvelous surprise for everyone as Dean Martin entertains and entertains, even though he wasn't scheduled to be on the show that night. Well, who was scheduled to be on the show tonight? A decent talent who had an act of canned jokes and a few country songs that made people giggle and a nice personality, but far from a true star of radio, television, and certainly not in pictures. And he's been around only for a short while. He's a clever fellow, however, and he saw his moment. That's right, George Gobel interrupts the proceedings, charging to the couch from backstage, also toting a plastic cup full of, you know, iced tea, wink, wink. Prince Bob Hope and Prince Dean Martin stand up for pauper George Gobel, moving down the line to make room for him at the seat of honor. There he is received by the jovial, ever hospitable Johnny Carson, who welcomes him to the couch warmly, setting him up for the best laugh of the whole night. George stops in mid-sentence, looks directly into the camera, and intones, "Do you ever have the feeling that life is a tuxedo and you're a pair of brown shoes?" There they all are. Bob Hope, working in showbiz since the early 1930s. Dean Martin, working in showbiz since the 1940s. And finally, George Gobel, working in showbiz only since the 1950s. They are all sharing the laughs, all enjoying the same wage for much different labor. Johnny Carson's thoughts are above their thoughts. His ways are above their ways. See, it's not about how many laughs you get when you're on Johnny Carson. It's whether you're even on Johnny Carson at all. In this way, the first will be last, and the last first. It is entirely unfair that Bob Hope should play third fiddle to Dean Martin and George Gobel, and he says as much to George. "I don't know what you're squawking about. I did the warm-up tonight." It is entirely unfair that Dean Martin should play second fiddle to George Gobel, and makes it known as much when he flicks cigarette ash into George's drink when he's not looking. Johnny knows it's unfair, but he knows we're all happy to be on the show. Doesn't it grate on you, though? Do you really acquiesce to Jesus, put your head down in lowly humility, saying earnestly, "Yes, Lord, I'm just happy to be working in the vineyard because the alternative, everlasting hellfire and damnation, is unthinkable"? Don't you automatically think about all the testing your faith undergoes? Don't you think about how much fun the sinners are having, knowing that in the end they'll march into the vineyard at the last minute, picking a few grapes and getting the same pay as you get after you slave away for a lifetime, filling sack after sack with grapes earned with your own blood, sweat, and tears. Lots of tears. The shame of being a Christian, as St. Paul puts it in Romans, for your sake we are being killed all the day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. The shame of being a Christian is enough to make me burn against this parable of Jesus. It's not fair, and God knows it's not fair. Otherwise, he would not have told the parable. The likes of me need to be reminded that it's not about wages. It just isn't about wages. The work in the vineyard is not about production or pay or reward. The work in the vineyard is about tending the vineyard. If you have something to do in the vineyard, you're already a leg up on everyone who doesn't have anything to do in the vineyard. Besides which, you may think you're something in the kingdom of God, but when you measure yourself up to the greats, like Martin Luther, Augustine, or Mother Teresa, and the other super megastars who worked in the vineyard long and hard, you start to look more and more like George Goebel. Besides which, when you measure up those greats to the Son of God, they shrink away. The greats don't even measure up to George Goebel. Martin Luther? Augustine? Mother Teresa? Nobodies in the vineyard of God. For all the work they did, it's still just picking berries. Piddling work. Who bought the field? Who planted the vineyard? Who nourished it, cared for it, pruned it in the winter, tied its tender shoots in the spring? Who tasted its fruit when it was still sour to know when it might yield its wine? Who hung on a cross to create the vineyard of God? The wealth belongs to Jesus. Every benefit you receive already belongs to Jesus. What a blessing to receive a denarius. Besides which, when we're talking about the end of the workday in the vineyard, we are talking about the end of the world. So when we are talking about a denarius, we are talking about life everlasting. When it's all said and done, I'll look down at the denarius in my hand, and first I'll say, I'll take it. And then I'll say, thank you.